Hey guys, and welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. Today we will be painting another fall inspired painting. I did do my sketch on just regular printing paper and then traced it onto watercolor paper. This is Centenaire watercolor paper, 300 GSM or 140 pounds. It is cold pressed watercolor paper and 100% cotton. Also, I will be using my watercolors. This is a fall collection, autumn collection. And if I did not mention, Sketch is available for download for you guys, so you can just follow the link in the description box and download it for yourself. So I did start with wetting the entire paper, and then with this leaf orange, I'm just doing a few splatters onto my paper just to make the background, to make it a little bit looser, and those splatters are in the upper part where I'm gonna do my flowers, something like lanterns. They look like lanterns. And afterwards I just started to paint my vase, and the paper is still wet, so the paint is going to bleed slightly outside the borders, but that's fine, I don't mind that. And I'm using black mixed in with fall turquoise just to give it slightly turquoise bluish tone to my vase. And afterwards I've mixed in a little bit of, again, that fall turquoise in Etchr green to start painting my pumpkin. And it's actually going to be somewhat white, yellowish pumpkin with those green lines where the slices are. And again, the paper is wet, so when I'm adding those lines for the slices, they're just gonna bleed. And again, that's fine, that's what I really want. Just softening the paint inside those lines, and then I'm doing a few splatters again with the same green. When I finish with that, for now, I'm painting the candle, and the candle is again leaf orange. On top, I'm adding a little bit of soft brown mixed in with black, and same mixture, but this time a little bit more black I'm using for the stem of my pumpkin, and also for those little lanterns some green. And you can see that I'm painting these at this moment very loosely. You can see how I'm holding my brush far away from the tip. I don't want to be petty at this moment. I just want to block in, put in where those flowers are gonna be. Paper is still wet, so the paint is bleeding, and that's fine. I do want to make it at this point a little bit looser, so I'm using orange, yellow and green to paint in, to block in them at this moment. A little bit of brownish color to do the stems also. And this time I'm using this Lebenzon paintbrush. I do love this brush. It just gives me such a loose look, and it is a great brush to paint in those stems, to paint in very thin lines, to paint looser paintings. So just adding a couple of more of those lines. You can see I'm wiggling with the tip of my brush to make them not straight. Some splatters again I've added, and then I left it to dry completely. And now that it's fully dry, I'm gonna do a little bit more details on my lanterns. And this time I don't want the bleeds because paper is now dry. So same colors I'm using as I did previously. I'm using leaf orange, sweet yellow and Etchr green. So mixing all those three at the moment for my little lanterns. So just minding that it does have sides, so I'm just minding that at this moment. Later on I will be adding more details, so just have in mind not to paint one blotch, but just to have the distinction between those parts, red, yellow and green. And you can see that I am leaving a little bit of the white somewhere in between those parts, and not all of them are exactly the same color. So some are a little bit more green, some are a little bit more orangey, some a little bit more yellow. That is up to you completely. And when finished with that, for now, I'm just adding a little bit more details to the pumpkin. Again, that same green, nature green. This time mixed in with a little bit of the black. And I'm doing the line and then just softening the edge with just the clean water and moving it also into that wider part. I don't want harsh lines. So just doing the back also of the pumpkin, again some splatters. And if you can't really concentrate your splatters at one spot, you can just cover with the tissue paper everything else but the pumpkin. If you don't want your splatters to go all around and you're just really not sure how to control them, so just cover everything around it. Now just doing a little bit more details on the stem, I guess that's stem of the pumpkin, using soft brown mixed in with a little bit of the black and then just black. And doing the lines, leaving some spots. You can see I left some spots white. Later on I will paint them also, but for now I want them to be white, and I don't want again to have the entire stem just painted completely. I do want to leave it also slightly white. And a little bit more of the details. So I'm going back and forward and doing the details on this now pumpkin, later on the candle vase, then the flowers. And that's just when you're adding those layers, you're actually building texture. So you can probably paint that in one layer, but I do like to add layers and just building one on top of the other, because watercolors are transparent. And when you are adding layers and layers and layers of paint, all those layers are doing something. They are just changing slightly the color, giving it a little bit more feel, a little bit different textures. So just keep that in mind. Well, I guess you can probably do that in one layer, but when you are layering your paint, you're just adding texture. And these paints are a little bit grainy, so they are giving the texture themselves also. A little bit more of that leaf green mixed in now with soft brown. And I'm just adding it again to my flowers, to those little lanterns. This time a little bit more in the shape of a line, just softening the edge. Now with green, and you can see right now that I am making this time the distinction between those parts of the lantern, of those little flowers, just making harsher edges, borders between those parts, giving them the shape they are. So that's also building the textures, building the layers. So first layer was very, very loose. Second layer, I was just adding those, again, paints to create the different levels, the different sides of my lantern. And right now, just doing the finishing details. Again, more details on the candle. I do want to make it a little bit darker. And the paint was drying, of course, it was becoming lighter, and I did want it to a little bit more of the paint. I will be adding more layers on top, so just keep that in mind. Also, I do want to do the edges. I did at the end go a little bit overboard with them. I didn't really like how they finished, those edges and borders on my candle, but it is what it is. So maybe you shouldn't just use too dark pigment. Use a little bit lighter. I wish I did use a little bit lighter. Maybe I could have gone over it and pick it up with my just a clean brush and then a towel, but I guess I did not do that. A little bit more details again to the pumpkin. As I said, going back and forward, just looking where I want to add more details, more paint, more color, more texture. I do want all of the objects on my painting to be the same value, so I'm adding more pigment. As it dries on one, I'm adding a little bit more just to make them same value. I don't want one to be very, very light and everything else quite dark and saturated, so I'm just trying to match all of the objects on my painting with their value and saturation of the color. So now just doing again, going over those stems I did earlier, branches, and just adding some more, going on top of the ones I did earlier. I will just also do branches, those very, very tiny small branches connecting my lanterns with those larger, bigger branches. And again, I'm not trying to make it perfect. It doesn't have to be everything perfectly connected. We're just creating some impressions. A little bit more details to those lanterns, just a touch-up, finishing touch-ups. They're dry at the moment, so no bleeds. And then also I decided to add a little bit of the pigment to the background, just to create some texture also there, not to make it look like they are somewhere in the air, my object, but they are somewhere in the world. So a little bit more of the pigment again to the candle. As I said, I will be adding a little bit more. Some splatters with green, with that grayish color, a little bit more paint to the background. And then also I decided to write a text onto my candle. You can use an ink pen if you have, especially if you have a ink pen in color, not black. I thought the black would be just too harsh here, so I decided to use my brush and watercolors to write that text, which is of course a little bit more difficult, but it is up to you if you want to use your ink pen. Just a little bit more paint to the vase. It was just looking too light, so I decided to add a little bit more paint there. Again, leaving one part of it a little bit lighter. Candle, just a little bit more pigment, yellowish to the pumpkin, more splatters, never too much of the splatters. Just adding a little bit of the paint also to the background. This time a little bit more up, and I left it to dry completely afterwards. I used this Posca pen. This is a fine tip Posca pen to add just a couple of white highlights. And with that, guys, I'll be finishing off this painting and this video. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget there is a sketch available for download. And I hope you're enjoying this fall inspired paintings. And just, if you do, please let me know. Just write in a comment, say what you think about it. And if you do like it, please hit the like button, share it. And if you haven't still, please do subscribe to my channel. There are over 400 tutorials there for beginners and intermediate, a little bit advanced painters. So guys, again, thank you so much for joining in, for watching this video, for sticking to the end. And again, I hope I'll see you next time. Bye!